Welcome to the Big Blue Breakdown. I'm Paul Dottino. So, we've seen through the first 2 days of the draft how the Giants have done a very good job of meeting value with need, right? You already saw how they got Abdul Carter, the pass rusher, at number 3. Then later on in the first round, they make the trade and they get the quarterback, Jackson Dart, at 25. Then they get Darius Alexander, the three technique defensive tackle out of Toledo in the third round after they had already traded the second round pick in the Dart deal. So the reason I bring this up is because they have established a pattern going into the fourth round. Now, let's make it clear. The Giants have very early picks coming up here. 105 in the fourth round, which is pick number 3. 154 in the fifth round, which is pick number 16. And then after not having one in the sixth, they are the third pick in the seventh round at 219 and the 30th pick in the seventh round at 246. So where will they go? Well, let's follow the pattern that they have shown so far. Value and need have met up pretty darn well. They've addressed the young quarterback. They've addressed the pass rusher. They've addressed the need in the trenches on the defensive side of the ball with a terrific defensive tackle. So, which bruised areas on the roster still need to be addressed? But there's still, because of depth in this draft, valuable players that could meet those requirements. All right. It would be running back, it would be offensive line, and it would be cornerback. So let's take a look beginning here in round 4. And I'm going to give you the possibilities at each of these positions where the Giants, could be looking based on need and value. Now, the guys I'm going to talk to you about will be my personal preferences if I were looking to fill those spots with these kinds of players. The Giants, well, again, they've shown a proclivity to have a very similar type of checklist. So let's start off simply by, if you go best player available, regardless of position, chances are the Giants will probably find a better choice of running backs than they will the other positions. Because this right here, the fourth round, is an outstanding neighborhood to get really, really good running backs. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that I would put Cam Scatterbo from Arizona State at the top of my list at 5'11 and 215 pounds. Guy who plays with power, balance, finishes plays, runs angry, sparks the huddle and his teammates, and quite frankly, the crowd with the kind of intensity and adrenaline he puts into every run. I do believe that while, he doesn't have the great speed and the great quicks and all of the great athleticism that a lot of the other backs would have in this spot, he would be the perfect complement to the Giants running back room. And so I personally would go after a power back, and Scatterbo is that number one guy for me. I'll give you a couple of other guys who certainly you could keep an eye on. Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State. Now, he runs very, very angry. He's got very good balance. He's got patience. 6'1", 233 pounds. Again, we're talking about a similar cut, a similar mold. Another guy you might want to consider. Now, he's a little bit more on the diminutive side, but more like a bowling ball. Again, runs very physical, tough, hard, downhill. That would be Trevor Etienne. Remember, his brother Travis was in the league a while ago. 1 year at Georgia, after 2 years at Florida. Interesting with him is that because he hasn't played a ton, only 370 career carries at the NCAA level, you have to question, well, why? He's had some injuries. That's something you certainly would need your medical staff to check into. But he does kind of run like a bowling ball with a low center of gravity and is forceful downhill. Also does have a burst and does show an ability to catch the football. So there's a guy you certainly would want to keep an eye on if you, again, you wanted a tough, powerful, downhill kind of runner. Damian Martinez from the Miami Hurricanes, 5'11", 236 pounds, very physical, has some quicks to his game, has good balance. Certainly another viable player there. Now, later on, and I say this because you just don't know if the Giants are going to go in the fourth round for the back, but you want to talk about guys who would be kind of sleepers. Well, I'll give you my biggest sleeper of all. That's the Bulldozer, Kalel Mullings, out of the University of Michigan, who basically was a one-year starter this past season, ran for nearly 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns and over 5 yards a carry. I think you could probably get him as late as, I don't know, he's a sleeper pick for me. So 6th round, I've had some people say he could be a free agent. I think he's going to be a dynamite pro in the role of a hammer. But I think Mullings, you don't necessarily need to go here in the 4th round for him. You could get him a whole lot later. As I say, he's my favorite day 3 sleeper of all of the running backs. All right, a lot of people are saying, well, what about the rest of the trenches? Well, there's no doubt. Offensive line is the other half of the trenches, right? And I got some guys for you in the trenches that I certainly would look at myself. Marcus Mabo out of Purdue. Now, he has shown some guard and tackle flexibility. And I think the interesting part about him is that some folks thought he might actually go a tad higher. But here he is right now, sitting here, available, has a really good motor, shows a lot of agility and really good technique. Ought to be interesting at about 6'4", 310 pounds, where he lands. He is certainly a guy who brings some quality to the table, even at this stage, early in the 4th round. My preferred guy in this spot is Miles Frazier. Now, he doesn't have the flexibility, at least in my mind. I look at Frazier as a guard. Listed him at 6'5", about 325. First thing I wrote down about him was that he is incredibly nasty. Very, very nasty. I like offensive linemen who are really, really nasty. Terrific frame, obviously, and has agility. Now, when you're talking about prospects of this nature at this stage, they're not going to be, checking all the boxes, obviously. That's why they're not in the 1st round. But enough where they could compete and they could certainly be an asset to your offensive line room. I'll give you one other guy. That would be Jaylen Rivers out of Miami. Shows a lot of flexibility. Has played left tackle and left guard for the Hurricanes. Did have a leg injury when he was in college. At the Senior Bowl, they also worked him out some at center. So we're talking about some versatility there. 6'6", 320. And I think the interesting part about him, frame, length, also wrote down, finishes off his plays very well. So that would be another maybe potential offensive lineman that you would look for if you were going to take one here in the top of the 4th round. And remember, the way the Giants' picks are going to fall, they do have one in the 5th midway through. So any of those guys who may still be there in the 5th would certainly be viable options. All right, sticking with the value and the need component, we go to cornerback. And you can always use more depth at corner. Joe Schoen himself said there was a lot of depth at corner in this draft, not necessarily starters, but guys who could play. And so I'm looking at Denzel Burke out of Ohio State. Now, 4-year starter, did have inconsistencies this year, but if you like him because of his traits. His traits really project very well to the pro game. At 5'11, 186, really good tools, has quicks, very physical player. You just need to polish up some of the inconsistencies. He had a bit of a slump this year, a few games that I'm sure he'd like to forget about, but comes out of a great program and certainly has all of the traits that pro cornerback coaches would love to get their hands on. Dorian Strong out of Virginia Tech was another guy that I really kind of liked as well, potentially at the corner spot. Ball skills, very physical, wraps up in tackling, goes about 6'1", 185 pounds. So I'm just giving you a couple of corners, giving you a couple of, or I guess it was 3 offensive linemen, and also giving you a few running backs to look at. For me, I think as I continue to go through day 3 here for the Giants, again, I came into this whole process thinking I would personally address the trenches, both sides of the ball. So they've done the defense. I think you'd like to try to get somebody on the offensive line. I was looking for a power back. Power back has not been gotten yet, but this should be the neighborhood where you would be expecting to get one. And then depth at cornerback. Once again, this would be the area or the neighborhood where you could expect to get one. So I think day 3 lines up very well for the Giants should they continue to go with the method that they've shown so far, finding value, meeting need in the right neighborhood of where the talent was lying in this year's draft. So that's all we have for the Big Blue Breakdown right now. Don't forget, we're going to be back with a complete wrap-up of what the Giants did during the 3-day draft. That is going to come on Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, a special edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live, where we will take your chats as well as your audio calls and your phone calls. No reason to go Wednesday this week. Why would we do that? I know that's our usual day and time, but because of the draft, we're going to bump the show up a couple of days, and we'll be back live with the Big Blue Breakdown Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, to wrap up all of the comings and goings for the New York Giants during the NFL Draft. That'll do it for now. I'm Paul Dottino. We'll see you next time.